Summer has come and gone, and now it's back to school. And we're just happy to be back with you guys. And how have you been, Vix?
Oh, busy. Like, yeah, you said school started again, and kind of the schedule of, waking up kind of late and everything's kind of laid back. And then school started, which means that's already, kids going back to school. So schedule. And then I've gone back to work at school as well. And then all my projects have been coming up. So yes, it's like I was telling my therapist yesterday, I'm like, I'm so overwhelmed. There's so much to do. And for me, I tend to, when I get overwhelmed, some people like start to plan and that helps them feel secure. For me, it's a little bit like, let's put the blinkers on and just like avoid until things actually happen. So I've kind of been in avoidance mode for the last 3 weeks of I know there's so much to do and I'm just gonna wait and see what falls in my plate first and it'll happen naturally. And yeah, it doesn't always work out too well for me. And I realize I need to be a bit more intentional about
Oh,
what I'm supposed to be doing. That's kind of what I'm learning about myself.
I'm the exact opposite, and I would like to be able to have that trait, which is just be able to put the blinkers on, sorry, blinders on, and be able to say, just wait for things to just kind of like happen organically, see what falls into your plate. Because for me, I do that over planning thing and preparing for every scenario, and then having a scenario if those scenarios fail. And then many of those things don't happen. And I've just realized I've spent all this energy on doing all that planning for all those scenarios. So if I had a little bit more, what have you had? Just, wait for them to happen. Yeah, yeah.
I think
So,
also our roles as maybe sisters, and I know people don't really believe like birth order, well, that's crap. I do believe it does have something to do with
mm,
birth order and kind of the way your probably responsibility was. And you're only 2 years older than me, but you can see we do. And I've noticed it over the last probably couple months of some of the stuff we're talking about. I do have the planning thing to some extent, but only on certain things. I over plan and then worry about those plans. And in other areas, I'm like, throw everything up and let the cards fall where they may. And I'm like,
mm,
ugh. So I've been learning to do that a bit more. I think kind of like go with the flow and let's see what happens. I've been really working on that because I have been, guilty of the over planning things and definitely the overthinking of the things of what's happening.
mm,
So when it comes to kind of like my family, I'm like super, let's plan things and make sure. But when it comes to other things more in my personal life, I'm more like, I'm completely the opposite. And it's so weird. I'm like, how come in some areas of my life I'm like super planned, and other areas I'm like completely like, let's just go with the flow and see what happens. Fly by the seat of your pants. So yeah, I think it has a lot to do with control, I think. And and when I realized like why do I need that control? Like what does that give me? And I realized we're talking about basic human needs, it's safety. If I plan, if I overthink, if I make sure all the scenarios are planned for, it gives me some sense of control and
yeah.
that gives me safety,
Mm,
and it usually never works out that way, right? So
mm,
it's a lot of extra worrying, like, worrying about stuff in the future, most of which never happens. And I just spent all my energy worrying and planning about stuff. So this year has been a lot more like trust my intuition that I will be able, I have enough tools, I have enough resources to handle when stuff will come up, but don't plan for a million different scenarios when probably only one or two are going to happen. And I
mm,
realized I was wasting so much of my energy doing that. So yeah,
mm.
that's kind of what my learning, my next step of learning has been this year. It seems it's coming up in many different areas of my life. So yeah.
Mm. That is interesting. Yeah. I wouldn't say this last year, but more like the past couple of months, learning what things I can, kind of keep close to my heart and plan for those things and have a certain sense of containment and safety within what I can control, and then being willing to just let go of the rest. Yeah, that's kind of been on my radar recently. All right, so today the topic is relationships, and I guess you and I were talking about how our relationships have evolved in the past few years, kind of like what we've been learning personally in our own lives, and how that has impacted our relationships with our spouses, with our family members, parents, with our children, and then also kind of taking a look at more our background and our history and our upbringing as children,
Mhm.
because I think yeah, it's a good topic to talk about and also kind of to look at and see the lessons that you've learned, what has gone right, what has gone wrong, what you would do differently, or what you would like to do more of. So yeah, let's I've just put some questions together and we can dive right into it. Okay, so the first question is, what is your understanding of relationships? Everyone has a little bit of a different idea of how they want to frame it or how they discuss it, but yeah, for you, what would that be? Your understanding of relationships.
So I guess there first of all, there's different kinds of relationships, right? You have romantic, you have friendships, you have professional relationships, you got personal relationships, you got the relationships where you're more the person in power, like being a parent, and I guess, and then sometimes where you're feeling a little bit more like the underdog in the relationship. So for me, it's just really, oh, and then I kind of what I realized about during all my growth process and everything is that our internal relationships with ourselves and our different parts really kind of give an indication how our external relationships are going to go. And I realize I'm like, whoa, my relationship with that part of me is exactly like my relationship with this person in my life. And it, so for me, I'm like, whoa, my external relationships mirror my internal relationships with the different parts of me. So that's
Yeah.
what I realized. Like, that's so amazing. And whoa, that means if I change my internal relationships with that part of me, that external relationship might also change.
Mm, yeah.
So yeah, it's just how two people relate to each other, how they set each other off, what, what about them, about their personalities trigger the other person, what about the other person triggers me, or yeah, triggers me, I guess we're talking in this sense, and how we learn to communicate and manage those differences, as well as kind of appreciating and communicating our appreciation for the parts of somebody else that really meld very well with our own personality, make us feel safe or make us feel loved or make us feel understood and seen. So, yeah, I would say in some ways, whether it's romantic or whether it's not, and whatever our position in the relationship, that's kind of how I see all different kinds of relationships. Yeah.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, that's a very, I think, kind of healthy, holistic overview of, how to look at relationships. I think for me, it's something similar. If I were just to define it, it would be like the interpersonal dynamic or connection between, it could be two people or two parties or two entities. And then, yeah, I didn't used to really think much about relationships at all, either
Mm-hmm.
within myself. I wasn't even aware that I had a relationship within myself or with myself. And then, of course, that then played out to the relationship that I had with my, I guess, earlier on, my then husband or my ex-husband, my kids. I kind of just took everything for granted, this is just the way things are. And it was a lot more about like personality. I guess I had a much more immature understanding of myself, of interactions, and it was all just like, what personality type are you? I'm just this, I have these certain character traits about me that meld well with yours. And then it was a lot more about like, do we have the same hobbies or do we have the same interests? Or, it's just a lot more simplistic in a way, in a sense. And
Yeah.
those things are all good, but
Yeah.
they're kind of more surface level.
Surface level. I was about to say a little bit more shallow, and probably what the
Yeah.
majority think relationships are. Do I meld
Hmm.
well? Do we have the same hobbies, which are super important? But it
Yeah.
is kind of a little bit, like you said, a little bit immature because this is what I'm starting to teach kids, like in middle school or in, even elementary school. Like, do they have the same interests as you? And we're starting to talk about values a little bit deeper, right? But it is very much like, how do you make friends? Do you have the same common
Yeah.
interests?
Yeah.
And it's not like the deep level of stuff that we're realizing, like in marriages and in, relationships with family. It goes a lot deeper. Yeah.
So much deeper. So when I got into my first, you could say serious or committed relationship with, who was the person who was going to be my husband at that time. Yeah, it was just very, oh, well, first of all, there's physical chemistry, we like each other. There's the physicality. And then we can talk all night, we can talk all night about everything. And then, sparks
Yeah.
flying. And then, yeah, our personalities really just go well together. We talk really well together. We have similar interests. We like doing the same things. So yes, a lot of that very superficial stuff, and it's good because you need to have that initial attraction. But the problem is that I don't think we ever went much further than that. It's like we connected on those things well, we had an understanding, we got married, we raised kids together, but then at a certain point, you you haven't even really learned who you are yourself. And so you're kind of like slowly growing and maturing, and our brain doesn't even fully, prefrontal cortex doesn't even fully form until we're what, 25 years old. So this is all going on in my brain and then all going on in his brain. And before you know it, and it sounds cliche, but you're two different people. But the problem is not that you've become two different people over time, which is fine. We all grow and mature, but that you only really connected on a superficial level, and you didn't continue to grow together, like understanding, oh, this is this new thing about myself, and how does that reflect now in my partner? So you're not kind of growing together, and you're not actually, at that time I was incredibly immature, I wasn't healing from all of the stuff that I needed to heal from, and you just like become two different people overnight, on different places, pages of your life, and so many more of the differences then are right there in your face and are so hard to deal with. So I think that's kind of over time, my understanding of relationships is that it goes so much deeper, and you can only connect well in a relationship with another person to the extent and to the level that you've done that, and you've done that growing yourself. And if you haven't done it, there's no way that you're going to be able to do that with a whole nother person if you haven't even done it within yourself. Yeah.
Or I find, I guess, for me, it was a little bit opposite. I was the same as you, where I, super immature, didn't know very much about myself. And because I didn't know very much about myself, instead of doing the work to be introspective and find out, why do I do the thing? Well, no one was teaching me that that was actually a thing. That's why I do
Yeah.
this now. Kids, I'm like, learn this early, please. Um, that instead of going inward and going, wait, why do I do the things I do? Why do I, have those patterns or anything like that? Why do I have these personality traits? And I realized that instead of doing that inside, I made everything about my personality the other person. So I made the other I'm going to learn all about you, and I'm going to learn all about
Oh
why
yeah.
you do things. And I lost who I was because I was so busy. I spent all the time figuring out who the other person was and
Oh
how
yeah.
I could change myself to suit them, right?
Yeah.
Rather than let's see, having a strong sense of self of I'm this person, you're this person. We each have our own individual needs and motivations and whatever. Let's see how they meld and bounce off each other, or maybe they don't. It was, and I don't know what I guess my motivation was. If I go down to really, really deep levels, probably fear of abandonment. So I'm going to do whatever it takes to keep this person. So I'm going to learn all about you and my life. My entire existence is going to be to be the best person I can for you. And I
Mm.
totally lost myself. And it's interesting because every time I just watched it recently again, and I was like, oh, that's an interesting movie. Runaway
Runaway
Bride.
Bride. Yes,
Yes.
I was thinking
Yes. And she,
exactly with Julia
exactly the same
Roberts,
thing.
where she continually like morphs herself to reflect the other person because she doesn't really know who she is, or she has some trauma around
Yeah.
that. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like what kind of eggs does she like? Oh, she likes this kind of eggs. No, she doesn't. She likes
She
this.
doesn't.
All her exes are talking and they're like, wait, who is this person? She said those were her favorite kind of eggs. And something is so simple as that. And I realized that obviously in my teen years, I was like you're saying, we're in our 20s and we don't even realize this about, or we're still learning this about ourselves. I think in your teen years, it's like completely, it's just a mishmash, and it's like you're
Yeah.
a soup, and you're trying to put different ingredients in and see what comes out. Right? It's how I used to do cooking. But definitely when I got to my 20s, I had these very set kind of personality, not personalities, but set characters that I could play. Like, so if I was going into this situation with these kind of people, I could be this kind of person. When I was going to this situation, I knew I had to be this kind of person. And I wasn't myself in any of those things. There are probably elements of my personality that came out, but it was like I was playing a character. And I look back now at I'm like, the crowds that I hung out with were so specific and
Mhm.
so different as well. And yet I fit into every single one.
Yeah.
And yet in each one, I never felt like I fit in, which was like so weird. Like I played this part, and yet, and the whole time, like, who am I? I'm just pretending here. Everyone else seems to think I fit in and I can talk like them and I can dress like them and pretend like I like the same drinks. And then 2 hours later, I'm going to go hang out with my other friend group and they're totally different. And I'm going to be
Wow.
that kind of, and it
Mm.
was really weird. I mean, like talk about being a chameleon. That's how I felt in each of those situations.
Weird
Yeah.
and tiring too, because
It's
you're
exhausting.
constantly
Yeah.
trying to fit in and you constantly have to, change into this and that. But like you, the real authentic, the core you is like just completely left behind or lost in all of that. I could just imagine like the feeling of being like so tired. When you're speaking of like changing, I used to like tell myself, oh, people are so much more interesting than reading a book. So I would rather like go and hang out with a person and get into, sometimes it was a romantic relationship, sometimes it was just a friendship, but it would be like, oh, but I'm learning about the world through this person, through their eyes, and it's so amazing and so fascinating. But like he said, I was like losing myself in who they were or in their world. Like I would not even, it's not like I could just sit and listen. I would become completely enmeshed with who they are and their life experiences and not knowing where I started and they began or vice versa. So there was a lot of that going on, yeah. And always feeling like, yeah, but for me, I framed it as, oh, but this is me being really progressive. This is me like being super like knowing myself and finding out about who I am, but actually completely losing myself and not knowing who I was. So yeah, the journey of relationship and kind of like finding really who are you and all of that. I think that's like a really key moment. Yeah, and that kind of goes into the second question, which is how has your understanding of relationship changed, evolved over time? I guess we've kind of already answered it, but
Yeah.
like for you, was there a like a pinnacle moment or a time where like a point in time, or did it kind of happen gradually where you realized, wow, I really don't know who I am and who I am in these relationships, and I kind of want or need to do something to change that?
It definitely happened over time. And I think it didn't happen out of any aha eureka moment. It was just I saw myself. I saw other people like growing and moving on with their lives and becoming more certain in who they were and how they presented themselves and confidence level. And I was just like, I'm just the same. I'm the same. I'm tired of playing this part and not getting any closer to finding out who I am. It's like I'm trying on a bunch of different costumes, trying to find out which is the one that fits me, and none of the costumes fit me. And this is tiring. Am I ever going to find the right costume? And I realized like that's just it. Everything else is a costume. You are your own person. I was like, oh, I need to find out who I am, not apart from all these costumes. I know I can play parts, I can always fit in, but I'm really tired of feeling like nobody actually sees me for me. They just see me of this part I'm playing. And I know it's fake. And when they actually start to get to know me, I actually get scared that they're going to see
Mm,
the real me and they're not going to like it. And
yeah.
so finding out, like, I want to be proud of who I am. I want to stop putting on these costumes. I want people to see me for me. And I want to not be afraid or ashamed of who I am. So, first of all, I need to find out who I am, what my traits are. And then there probably are going to be some things I don't really like about myself, or maybe I'm quite ashamed of myself. And either I need to become comfortable. At the beginning, it was like, and so those parts of me that I don't like, I need to change, or I need to, adapt or whatever. And as I've gotten into my 30s and kind of realized, yes, humans are so multifaceted, and I'm like a million people in me, right? People like multiple personalities. Hello. I'm like, no, it's all parts. Little
Yeah.
I wrote a post about this and I'm getting super fascinated because I'm starting to do the modalities that I'm learning, but also that I've used with my therapist is a lot of parts work and just discovering more and more parts. And it's not quite the same as IFS. IFS is internal family systems, where you have like firefighters and exiles and managers. They all have like different titles. I guess for me, I'm not worried too much about titles because I know that people can get a little bit hung up on the titles of, oh, I realize that's my manager part. And I realize that's my firefighter part.
Mm,
For me, I like to think of them more as characters in me, and they all have different strengths. They all have different weaknesses. They all have different ages, and they all like
mm,
super different motivations based on the time when they were formed. And so I realized like there are some parts in there that are really you got like more your shadow self, right? They are just like bitter and jealous and just not they don't have good character traits, but they were created for a reason. And so before I was like, okay, the that really jealous part of me or that super insecure part, let's change that. And I realized that now in my 30s, the purpose isn't to change it. It's to they're there for a reason, and to accept them. And once they feel acceptance, they go back to where they aren't running the show, but they're still a part and they're accepted, right? And it's so mirrored in almost like our emotions, right? We have these uncomfortable, sad, jealous, hurt, and whatever, kind of the more uncomfortable or not commonly accepted emotions, and that they're still
Mm.
there. The purpose isn't to hide them; it's to say, hey, yeah, there are some times in my life where you're going to come out, and it's
Yeah.
okay and it's natural. But yeah, you probably shouldn't be running the show. That's not in the best interest of the whole, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, just over time, I think realizing that I needed to find out who I was and the traits that I didn't like about myself. At the beginning, I thought I had to change them, but I'm realizing that the things I don't like about myself, I actually need my acceptance.
Mm.
And my relationships with other people have kind of just morphed naturally as I deal with the different parts of me. And
Mm.
it is really weird because I thought it was the other way around. Once my relationships with the people outside improve, then I'm gonna feel at more peace with myself. I'm gonna feel more accepted, feel more loved. And it was actually the complete opposite. Like
Mm-hmm.
once I accept part of myself, and usually the things that trigger you and other people are the parts of yourself you haven't accepted yet. So once I accept it in myself, I'm no longer triggered by that in another person. So
Mm-hmm.
it changes automatically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's fascinating. Um, yeah, so in answer to the question that I asked you, so for me, like, was it a certain moment or did it happen over time? There's this one time where I think it like became like really kind of like a light bulb moment in my head. So I was attending church on the weekend at Ashwood Church, the church that I go to, and one speaker, she was talking about her recovery from long COVID. So
Mm-hmm.
she was like telling how, it's really affected her and her energy. And then she was talking about her relationship with her husband and with her teenage daughters. And she just said, I mean, she's speaking in front of, the congregation and she's talking and she says something like, and so in the mornings, the kids get up, and now I am not a morning person. Everyone can go and get their own breakfast. I am not making it for anyone. I am not a morning person. And just to hear her say that, for me, I was like, oh my God, she said she's not a morning person. And this has been like the bane of my existence. Like, I am not a morning person. I'm not only not a morning person, I'm an incredibly avid night owl. I mean, I love working at night, and sometimes like so much so that I go into the wee hours of the morning. When I did run my own business before, that was the time that I could get the most things done. It's like the world was quiet, everyone had gone to sleep. I would come alive because I didn't feel like I would be on call or someone would be interrupting. I just needed like time and space to myself where I could do my work, and that was where I did some of my best work. Probably not the best if I was really tired the next day, but I felt like I came alive the most. And if I was able to, manage my sleep and sleep at another time, I was able to work it out. But the difficulty I had with myself for the longest time was everyone's telling you, wake up at 4 in the morning, get in your journaling, get in your, exercise and, be one of those women that I'm like,
5
but
a.m.
I'm
club.
just not. And then I would be like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just like wake up super early? And I tried it a couple times and I tried it like more than a couple times. And it was always my New Year resolution. Okay, I'm going to wake up at 6 in the morning. And so for her to say, just like flat out, I am not a morning person. You girls go get your own breakfast. I was like, oh, she just didn't say that, did she? And I was like, wow, she said that. And no one's like coming to, string her up or hang her or do anything,
Or
be like, oh my
convince her,
gosh, you're
yeah.
not a morning person. And I was like, wow, if she can say that, that means I can say it too. And that means that it's okay. And it was just such a simple moment. But the fact that someone could admit openly and not even admit, just say, I'm not a morning person, that like gave me permission to be like, oh yeah, I'm not a morning person either. And is that okay? Yeah, it is. And like at that moment, I realized, oh my goodness, there are so many other things about me which I have always been like, you know?
Mm,
But if it's okay not to be a morning person, then it's okay to not be a this person or a that person, or, just like you said, the different parts of you or the parts of your personality or your characteristics, or there are certain things about you you just wish that maybe you were more, I don't know, sporty, or you were into meditation more, or you were into journaling more. If that's just not a part of you, then it really isn't. And you could do that, but it's never going to be like, oh, yes, this fulfills the deepest needs and longings of my heart. So, yeah, that's kind of was a thing for me when I realized, oh, it's okay, it's all right. And just having that in that moment, I just had a shift. And over time, just that kind of mantra in my mind, I'm not a morning person. I'm not a morning person. It's okay. I'm not a morning person. And that kind of then, goes into every other part of my life where I'm not a super, sporty person this morning. I didn't want to wake up at 5:30 and do a big, heavy workout. I just wanted to go for a gentle walk. And then
yeah.
that's okay. So certain things like that about me that I'm learning with time, and I think also age, to kind of accept myself and just love those parts about myself. And like you said, then when you've done it in yourself, then it's much easier to do it for others.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
That's so interesting. And I think you mentioned with age, this is
Yeah.
not something that happens in your 20s. And I was, the world tells us, have everything figured out, have all your shit figured out by the time you're 20 and da, da, da. I'm like, and I keep telling kids this, like, they're going into high school, talking about, our older kids as well, and who were graduating high school, now going to college or, even getting jobs. The world tells you you need to have everything figured out by the time you're in your 20s. How now? It originally, sure, yes, you probably should have been married and having kids by the time you were in your late teens because you only lived to 30 years old. And when you were 15 years old, that was half you were middle aged by the time you were 15, right? Because if you only, and most women died in childbirth in their 20s, so they probably even had shorter. When are we living to nowadays? And some people say 80, 90. I was like, probably in 20 years, it's going to be 100 plus, right? Who says you have to have everything figured out? You're not forcing a baby to walk. Like, you're going to school in 2 months. You need to, why is there this rush to have everything figured out by the time we're 20 when our freaking brains aren't even formed? Now we know that biology, we're not even formed, we're not even physically formed. Why do we have to have everything figured out? It's so
Mm,
unfair and puts so much pressure. And I know, we started things quite early. We were young moms. We had our families by the time we were mid 20s, right? And so to think like, okay, we need to have, we're responsible for other lives now. We should have our shit figured out. And we don't. And it's just like, what's wrong with us? Are we just going slow? Da, da, da. And so right now I tell my kids, your 20s are really just for experimenting and finding out who you are. Make mistakes, go do all the stuff you want to do.
mm,
And in your 30s you can kind of start to think about, like, you're going to understand yourself better. And then once you understand yourself better, you're going to be able to make decisions based on who you are, your values, your personality, your circadian rhythms, right? Don't take a night job if you're a morning person, right? So
mm,
rather than trying to have everything figured out in your 20s when you don't even know the different parts of you. And many people are in their 40s and still don't know the different parts of them. And that's why they're like, what's my life purpose? I thought I wanted to become a doctor, and actually I'm super musical. And my
mm,
entire life now is geared towards this. I set everything up to accommodate this when who I am is this. And this is
mm,
where I think so many people feel a mismatch in their purpose, and why so many people are leaving their professions, their what they thought was going to be their lifelong thing, and they're going, screw it. Other people have done it. I'm going to be okay, and just changing their whole direction of their life. And they're like,
mm,
it's amazing, right? But they shouldn't ever have had to change that drastically if they just were allowed to wait a little bit and figure out what they really wanted, instead of
mm,
society, parents going, this is what you need to do. This is the life path you need. Because all of us, like, some of people are going to be very academic and want to follow the 9 to 5. Other people are going to want to say, screw it, I'm going to go backpacking around the world and find out if that's true for me, or I want to become a struggling musician. But that's what makes me happy.
mm,
So yeah, I think so much of it comes with age, and there is this push where we have to have everything figured out in our 20s, and
mhm.
such a myth, such a fallacy, and really setting a lot of people up for failure.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Mm, yeah. Okay, so going on to the next question, it's okay, let's talk about family history. So when we're talking
Ooh.
about relationships, you can look at it through the lens of, okay, well, what were the primary relationships that I formed with my parents? And then also looking at, I mean, you can kind of zoom out a bit and think like, what were the relationships that they had with their parents or their community or their, culture, all of that. But if you kind of zoom in again to me, my mom, my dad, if you had a mom and dad, or if you had other family members who cared for you, what did your primary relationships look like? And then from there, you could say, well, then how then did that impact, or how does that impact my relationship with my friends or with my romantic partners or with my spouses? And then kind of one step further is also looking at how does this impact my relationship with my children? So I think those are the questions that for me, I've been looking at a lot more because my relationships have had to grow, change, evolve. Even I've had to kind of dismantle or deconstruct some relationships that I've had because they needed to kind of be rebuilt from scratch, or I needed to kind of look at what really wasn't working and say, okay, let's acknowledge this, acknowledge the elephant in the room, kind of let's not do that anymore. And what do we want to do in its place? So much of that happens when you start to, like you said, understand the relationship within yourself. And then once you kind of slowly start to heal and fix and work on that, once that is in a better place, that then becomes the catalyst for growth in all the other areas and relationships of your life. Yeah, so I was thinking we could talk a little bit about that, kind of like our own family history, how we were raised, the relationships that we had with our parents, and then kind of what that looked like going forward for both of us. Because I think it's a really interesting thing to see how there have been a lot of similarities in our lives. There's a lot of differences too, but then there are a lot of things that are quite similar, and it's quite uncanny. I think even the lessons that we've learned through them, some of them have been the same, some of them have been multifaceted, but I think it's just a really like amazing kind of almost sometimes a little bit spooky at
A
times
little bit spooky. I
dynamic.
was like,
Yeah,
this is so
how
weird.
similar there is, how many similarities there are. So yeah, let's like dive into that. Like if you're thinking about your relationship with mom and dad, like how was that for you?
Yeah, I guess, and some of this might be a little bit personal as well. So,
Mm,
we're going to be discussing personal stuff. And I know a lot of people shy away from family topics because, they're like, oh, I don't want to hurt, if these people are still in my life, I don't want to hurt mom. I don't want to hurt dad. I don't want to talk about these things. But that's one of the beauties of the work that we've been doing, that I think we have been able to be open about these relationships that we had and how they've affected us. And obviously, there's been so much growth and healing done on our parents' part as well, that they are now able to listen and hold space for when we say these kind of uncomfortable things, that it would trigger a lot of parents like, well, I did the best I could do, which so many people talk about. When I start having these conversations with my mom or dad, they just shut down, or they get so defensive or even angry, or they go into the, well, okay, I guess I can't do anything right then. And then you feel guilty, and then you have to, okay, I have to coddle them because I don't want to hurt their feelings.
yeah,
Obviously, this work, the reason why we're able to have these conversations now is because we've been doing this work for like three something, probably more, three
yeah,
something
probably
years,
more.
probably more. And it hasn't been, obviously we've been through we've been put through the paces where we've said this kind of stuff, that even between us, when we shared about our relationship as sisters, and there's been hurt feelings. How could you say that about me? And all this stuff. And we've had to revisit and then heal a little bit of our own and reflect. Well, maybe that some of that is true, and then come back
Yeah,
and discuss. So
yeah,
these kind of conversations don't happen overnight. And
mm,
I guess I want kind of any viewers to realize that if you're not at this place yet where you can feel you can talk openly about these things without fear of hurting somebody else's feelings, it doesn't mean it can never happen. That
mm,
it takes a lot of work. And if you try it and it doesn't work, or you don't get the result, or whatever, the reaction or response you want, that
yeah.
it just usually means that there's more work to be done inside as well.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, absolutely. And it's so natural as well. We want things to kind of, we come to our aha moment, and then we think in that moment, everyone else should have their aha
oh,
moment as well. We can all have an
let me
aha
share.
celebratory moment together. And it's so not that way because everyone's on their own healing journey, and everyone's on their own, like the journey is at its own pace. And that looks so different for different peoples at different times. In a way it's really hard because you want to kind of, when you have your happy moment, you want to share that with the next person. But I think a lot of that is having faith and having hope and just knowing that this is the right path, whether or not it feels like it or not, whether or not we're seeing, things happening. Like you said, we've been doing this for the last 3 years, probably more. I think actually that the groundwork for all of the actual changes that you and I are seeing now happened 5, 6, maybe even starting like 10 years ago, when you and I started noticing that something's not quite right. It's always that noticing that something's not quite right. And it may take you like 4 or 5 years to even figure out what's not
What's
right
not?
before you
Yes.
finally say, oh, okay, that's what it is. Now the heck, what do I do? So it's really, really a very long journey. So it's natural and it's normal to have all these kind of feelings of like, is this right? Am I on the right path or wrong path? Am I doing or saying the wrong thing? And that's why I think it's really helpful to have others as well who are also on that journey. So you can kind of like bounce what you're going through off them. So, like for you and I, you started, right? Kind of like it all started with you. You were the one who kind of headed it all up. And then you started sharing things with me. And then you and I were kind of sharing things back and forth. And then we started sharing things at different times and places with our sister, and then also with mom, and then with dad. So it's kind of like, it kind of happened a little bit at a time through one person and another and another. But I think because you and I are always had some type of open line of communication and a channel where we could be like, this is what's working, this is what isn't, what should I do, what shouldn't I do? That kind of helped to offer some stability when other people around us were just like, no, that's not for us. You keep your little happy healing group to yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really
And
key.
that's where I honestly believe that, we're all given these opportunities for growth, and
Mm,
may not always be at the point of your life where you grab that opportunity, but
yeah.
the opportunity always comes back around. And this is a whole, people say, well, why do I keep marrying the same kind of man? Why do I keep finding myself in these same situations? Because
Mm,
life will keep sending you these opportunities for growth. And are you going to learn the lesson this time? Nope, not ready yet. Okay, let's wait. It could be a couple of years later. It could be a couple months later. But
mm,
that's the purpose of life. And the more I do this kind of work, I'm seeing, wow, ooh, that opportunity for growth happened about 7 years ago, and I just wasn't in the place
mm.
to grab
Yes,
the opportunity and learn it.
right.
That's fine. I wasn't ready then, but I am ready now, and I'm not going to let it go. Like, ooh. And that's why I ask myself, like, when something really tough happens, I don't want to be like, I totally missed it because I wasn't in the right place right now. I want to say, what is supposed to be the lesson I'm learning here? And also, I see the lesson. I don't think I can handle this. I'm not ready for this. Okay. And having the faith that if you let go of it, it's going to come back around in a couple years or whenever. And I may be more ready then. Or, you know what? I don't think I'm ready right now, but I'm going to grab it and I'm going to sometimes be thrown into the deep end, and let's just see. Let's test my sea legs and see if I can manage it. And
Right.
I think that faith comes from knowing that you've been through really tough things in the past, and that you have the tools and the resources and the support group, that it's going to be a hell of a ride. But if you can if you can get out through the other side and be like, I did it, and you're like broken arms and whatever,
Yeah.
but I made it. And okay, I probably, and usually the opportunity will come back around in the future for you to do an even better job. But
Hmm.
yeah, we just keep getting better at these opportunities, right? And so I
Yes.
forgot what the original question was.
Yeah, a
Oh,
little bit
our
better with
relation.
each iteration. Yeah. Our relationship with our parents. Yeah. And then
Parents,
we
yeah.
we we segued into, well, this is going to be a, personal and a family thing, but yeah, it's kind of good to lay that groundwork. Yeah.
So I mean, I mentioned it right at the beginning, but we talked about some of our earlier episodes about how we were, now mom and dad were separated from us, or we were separated from them when we were really young. I was 3, you were 5, Miguel
Hmm.
was
Hmm. He was
2
just a
or 1,
baby. Yeah.
maybe.
He was a baby when it
Um,
started.
and obviously, what we know about child development and everything, kids need that parental, some kind of adult, stable adult in their life, attachment figure, to help feel secure. And I guess we, through no fault of mom or dad's own, just the circumstances that we lived in, we were separated from them and we were kind of left to fend for ourselves in many ways.
Yeah.
And I think even what happened with you, what happened with me, and what happened with our younger brother, because it was just us three at the time, the support that we got really impacted our personalities and who we became.
Right. Right.
So the fact that I talk about how I actually, now I learned very quickly, I have to be good, I have to be easy, I have to be, the acceptable child in order to receive that support, in order to receive that safety, that kind of attachment figure who wants to take care of me, right? Because I
Mm.
was looking at you, who was very, very, spoke your mind and was deemed the naughty child and was punished
Yeah.
and didn't receive that protection. And I
Mm.
thought, I can't do that. I need the safety, right? So I need to be the good girl. I need to be sweet and kind and smile all the time and be super cute. And that way
Mm.
I receive the support and the protection that I need. And I did receive it. I had
Yeah.
two or three, one teen girl, she was only probably 16, and then a
Mm.
couple other adults who kind of did look out for me, and they weren't taking care of me, but they really did their best to come and visit me and talk with me or take me out for little walks or things like that. So I did form attachment to these different adults. And I know your circumstance was a little bit different.
Yeah, very, very different. But just to go back briefly to you, you even kind of got the label of being the good, sweet, um, what was it, like quiet, acceptable girl from our stepfather when, a little bit later on. So I think you learned, and then it was reinforced that you needed to behave and be a certain way, right? And
If I
for me, it
wanted,
was, yes,
yeah,
because you wanted that, and then you got it, and then it was reinforced,
reinforced,
like,
yes.
yeah. And so for me, it was complete opposite. I didn't learn to be a good girl until I was just thick-headed. I should have just gotten it, but not until I was about, I think, 10 or 11. That's when it finally started to click that, oh, yeah, if I don't want to be in trouble and beaten all the time, I need to be a certain way, and that certain way is not the way I am. So yeah, happened a bit too late for me, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately. But yeah, for me, it was I was outspoken. I was, asking questions, super curious, and always, being willing to push against what I felt was injustice or something that was wrong or something that, just didn't sit right with me. I needed to get answers. Whereas you're like, I'm okay. I'm just gonna, sit back and be quiet and be nice and be who everyone needs me to be. And then our little brother, for him, it was like, I mean, he's a baby, you're not even able to take those bits of information and process it. And you can say, I'm not going to cry, or I'm not going to, not wet myself. I'm just going to be a baby because that's who and what I
He
am
had
at this
health
stage in
problems
my
as well.
life.
So I think that gave an extra layer that he was a baby with needs, or I guess a toddler with needs. He had
Yeah.
very skin condition and super itchy, and mom thought he had colic when he was younger. So he was a somewhat difficult baby if you're just looking at it from the behavior, rather than, hey, he's a baby who didn't have that attachment figure, that stable attachment figure, because he was separated from her when he was like 9 months old or something, right? Just
Yeah.
starting to
Very
walk
young.
and all, going through all of this. And, young children are very, very sensitive. They have mirror neurons. And so the fact that his life, or I guess all of our lives, but him, when his brain was still so, sponge, so absorbent, right? And that he probably felt all the discomfort and the fear and the anxiety around him. And just in addition to already being a baby and feeling super insecure and like, who's going to be taking care of me for my
Yeah.
survival, felt all of that from mom and all in our literal physical situation when he was
Yeah.
being shipped back and forth and ferried back and forth between two different places. And where is he going to stay? Who's going to look after him? We don't know, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, obviously that totally affected him. And we talked
Yeah.
about that. Right?
Yeah. So then if you kind of fast forward then in our lives to a little bit older, I think around my teenage years, that's when I started to conform because I realized that if I perform a certain way, like literal performing, singing, dancing, then people say, oh, this girl has something to offer. So we're going to bring her in. We're going to take care of her. We're going to, kind of give her a platform to, show herself or her voice. And in a way, that's nice because for the first time in your life, you're receiving attention. And that attention is good attention. It's not attention because you're being punished or because you've said something wrong again. It's attention because you're beautiful, you're attractive, you have a nice voice, you this, that, and the other. So I quickly learned, okay, there's another way to get attention. It doesn't require me to be beaten. And so I started then to really fit into that role and I thrived in it because there is something about us that naturally we have our talents, we have our gifting, and those things are always within us and they should be nurtured from the time, we're children. It shouldn't have to come out as a defense mechanism. Like, this is the only part of me that is good and nice and lovable. And all the other parts of me, no, absolutely not. Do not show that because that's not acceptable. Right. So then I went to the opposite extreme to be the good girl. And I think that's when you started to be like, "Whoop, I'm not going to be this good girl anymore." So we
Yeah,
switched roles.
we did
Yeah.
switch roles, but I did it in a lot more in a kind of quieter way because again,
Yes.
it came out naturally for me, but I was still like, I know what people expect of me. I know what people want to see. So I'm going to give them that. And behind the scenes, I'm going to be, let's go off rails and do all the bad stuff. Right. So
Yeah. Yeah.
and I remember, I was always praised for being the good girl, the shy girl, or the girl who was really smart, or the teacher's pet, or whatever, growing up. And then when you took on this role of kind of responsible, and you were doing all the right things, right, taking all the
Mm,
right steps, and for the decisions that were made of the bad decision or the good decision, Michelle always chose the good decision. And I
mm.
remember our stepdad saying to me, like, Michelle is the pillar in our family. And I just remember like pillar, just like that she's the pillar in our family, like the exemplary pillar. And you need to look up to her. And the thing is that my behavior wasn't bad that they knew of. I was still doing what I needed to do. I just wasn't as good as you. And
Mm,
this is where I think these parental labels and roles
yes.
really affects kids because they think like I need to live up and I need to be exactly like my older sister. And this is where I think the sibling rivalry, whether or not
Yes.
we admitted
Yes.
we had it, oh, there was a lot. Now we didn't argue, but there was
No.
so much competition between
There was tension, yes.
us.
But it's so interesting that you remember this term, the pillar, because just a few years before, what was I? I was the monkey wrench. So I went from
Yes, you were
being
the
the monkey wrench to being the pillar. And then never again was I ever the monkey wrench. But maybe I would have liked to have been a monkey wrench sometime.
yeah, it
Just
isn't
to like
so
show my true self.
labels.
But yeah, like you said, those labels and how parents want their children, if their needs somehow have not been met, to fit into certain roles in order to make themselves feel better about life or whatever. And then it comes down to the children. And that really then affects how they're going to be in their relationships going on further in life. Yeah.
Whether or not they go, well, I had all this expectation put on me as a child. So therefore, and I don't think we do it intentionally. That's why I call it default parenting. It's just something ingrained in us that we almost have this resentment. We carry this chip on our shoulder that, well, my parents did this to me. And so we go one of two ways. Either, well, I turned out okay, and we do it by default, or it was I hated when my parents did that to me. So I go to the complete opposite. And they're not doing it as a choice. They're still doing it as a rebellion because they're upset that their parents put that parental role on them or that expectation on them. And they're just like, I'm going to do the exact opposite with my child. And usually the sweet spot is somewhere in the middle. It's not, I'm going to completely um, rebel against everything that my parents did because usually the intention of the parent was right. It's just the way they handled it was their own baggage from their own parents, right? And this is why we call it intergenerational trauma. You're just here, have my baggage. I felt this from my parents, so you're going to feel it too, right? And it's just,
Mhm.
it's so damaging. And until you realize that so much of our behavior as parents and so much of what we do is just these vestiges of baggage that our parents gave to us. And usually we don't even want to be holding them, but we hold on to it because I don't know, in some ways, I think that we take on that part of our parents' label as our identity, right? I've got to be the pillar. So I always have to be performing and I have to be a strong member of society and my community and stuff. We take on our labels, right? And this is why
Yeah.
I'm so against labeling children because whether it's a good label, they're the pillar, right? And all of a sudden you felt this responsibility of I have to be the pillar. And I wish
Yeah.
I could have been the freaking monkey wrench sometimes. I wish I could have been a mess, but I had to be the pillar. So
Yeah.
yeah, this is how damaging labels are, I feel.
Yeah, yeah. So going from like how our relationships were with our parents, I think for me, I noticed a little bit later on in my relationships, in my first marriage, when I started to notice cracks and things kind of not really going as, I hope for them to be. I noticed that I had this really, really deep need to be protected.
Mm.
Like, I didn't realize, but it's like I felt that I really want there to be like some sort of hero or savior or figure that's going to not maybe literally, maybe not literally, maybe, or figuratively kind of swoop in and save me because I don't feel I have that in my relationship with my then husband. There must be something wrong in our relationship. And I kind of like was looking and looking like, where did this kind of need for wanting to be safe and saved and for someone to kind of swoop, where did that come from? And I kind of then slowly started tracing it back to, so when I think, yeah, I was around 5, you were 3, Miguel was just born, sorry, our brother was just born. Um, our mom and our birth father, they separated, and it was a separation that didn't happen over time. It was like from one day to the next, or one day to the night, he was like gone, and we didn't see him again until I was, what, 6 years later, when I was 11 and you were
That's
about 9. So to have, and I was like a daddy's girl. I was really close to him. We were really, really close. That I would say that probably he was the strongest attachment figure I had other than mom. But with him, it was very emotional because we were similar in maybe a lot of different ways, like character or personality wise. And I was his firstborn. And I know that he really, he loved both of us, but I think there was some connection that I had, maybe because I was also a little bit older. You were 3s and I was 5. So some things would have already kind of taken place and been cemented. So there was that there. And then from one day to the next, he's just completely gone. And I don't hear from him ever again. And I didn't realize at the time, it's like, okay, you go on, and then we got a stepfather, and then mom was there, and then she wasn't there. Or, finally our family came back together. It looked different than it did before. But something in me was like, but daddy was gone, or I called him Papa. Papa was gone. And then I have a new daddy. And then it was like this real need to be loved, to be accepted, to not be abandoned, to not be forsaken. And then the relationship with our stepfather was quite strained at times because I had this big personality and because I was loud and boisterous and always got into, you know, problems and issues. And it was hard for him coming in already having 3 step kids. And he was just learning how to be a new father. I was trying to find my father, and it just didn't go well. So I just had this need like, well, where is my daddy? And where is that relationship that I really want and that I also lost? Of course, none of this is going on. I'm not cognizant of this at all, but it's all going on. So later than on in my life, I went into relationships kind of looking for that savior or hero or someone who would kind of step into that fatherly role in a sense. And many times, it wasn't there. And if I ever did feel like a sense or a need, like, oh, this person could provide, there would be some gravitas towards that person. And sometimes it was healthy, sometimes it wasn't healthy, but it was a definite theme in a lot of my relationships going forward. Yeah.
Mhm.
How about for you?
Yeah, yes and no. I think I almost had that same need, but it came out in a very different way. And this is where it's so interesting. You say, how come two siblings with so similar experiences, exactly the same similar life experiences, have completely different like split? That's why I said, we have the choice between I'm going to rebel or I'm going to go exactly along with what I was taught. So for me, it was, I guess I was 2 years younger. Um, and I don't know. And I think I'm a lot more like mom. So mom, talks about how she kind of also was the good girl in her family, a big family. She was a third of 6 kids or something. And how she was in that middle role, so she was the mediator between her older sisters and her younger sisters. And then when her older sisters were kind of causing problems, she was like the good girl, right? And helping our grandma clean and cook, and she got a lot of attention that way of, oh, she's the
Mm.
one I count on. And so again, I didn't know all of this back when I was 3 years old, but this is where I do think that epigenetics and parents parents, almost their energy or their something about them translates down to their kids, whether it's genetically or whether it's energy wise or whether it's just some kind of, you're talking about cosmic karma or whatever. But I took on the role that mom took on the role in her family. And again, completely unconsciously. And I became the good girl. And then also kind of realized that I wanted that attachment figure. I wanted somebody strong, but they weren't just going to magically appear. I had to somehow do something in order to earn that. And I'm
Mm.
hearing all this, I'm like, oh, so many threads there. But I had to do something to earn that. That person wasn't just going to magically appear because somehow it wasn't that I was worthy of it. It's I earned it, right? I deserve.
Mm.
Just had this conversation about worthy and deserving with somebody else and how worthy is who you inherently are. Deserving is something you do. And so
Mm.
I felt somehow, oh, see, I'm going to start crying again,
Mm.
that because mom and dad left us or had to leave us as
Mm.
very young children, that somehow there was something wrong with me. And again, I didn't put this down to you. This was just my own experience, that somehow there was something wrong with us. We weren't
Mm.
of having a mom and dad like the other kids, right? There must be something wrong with us. Why did the other moms and dads leave and ours did? And especially one of my best friends, her mom and dad were still there. And she talked to me about, and I'm going to go have parent time now. And I was like, I don't have a parent. So somehow there was something wrong with us that we weren't worthy to have mom and dad. And so if I wasn't worthy, I had to work really hard to deserve a mom and dad, or I had to work really hard to earn that attachment figure. And that's what I did. I was a good girl and I got somebody who looked after me. So this is the way things are done. If I'm not worthy enough in who I am, then I need to always try my best to always make sure there's somebody there to take care of me. And it worked for me, right? So I didn't have the same kind of almost like an external locus of control where somebody's going to come in and rescue me. It's I've got this quite strong internal locus of control. I can create what I need.
Mm.
And as I got older, that translated into I can make I'm really strong. I can do this. I have to work really hard for it, but I have to control whether or not I get what I need.
Mm.
And so in a way that became a source of comfort for me of I can do this. I have everything I need. And if it's not happening though, it must be my fault. Right.
Mm.
So strong internal locus of control, but also a lot of responsibility of if it's not happening, if I'm not getting what I need, if my life doesn't look the way that I want it to, it's my fault. And
Mm.
so, yeah, a lot of power, but a lot of guilt and responsibility as well.
Yeah.
And so as I got older, it was very much, I can do this myself. I'm not looking externally for somebody to, oh, I think in a roundabout way, I was looking for that external figure, but at the same time, it was, what can I do to create that? What can I do to attract? Obviously, I didn't realize attraction, law of attraction, or anything like that, but what can I do to make my external world meet what I need? And so I always had this kind of internal confidence that I can do it, but at the same time, I didn't always feel strong enough to do it. And so when it wasn't happening, I blamed myself. When I didn't have that person out there, I was like, there must be something wrong with me. I need to just work harder or change myself. And I also kind of gravitated towards slightly older people. So my first relationship slash marriage, he wasn't that much older than me. He was also part of the cult we grew up in. But when I later on kind of had the choice of who to go for, I always went for older men.
Mm.
And I think some similar to you, that I felt that kind of security and safety with somebody who kind of had their life a little bit more together, who seemed more mature. And yeah, so similar, but also very different, right? You were like, I
Yes.
need somebody to come in and rescue me. I was like, I have to do it all myself. If it's not happening, it must be something that I'm not doing.
Mm.
So that's really helped me in some ways of I really do feel I have this internal strength in me but at the same time, it's also such a heavy burden to carry sometimes. I'm just like,
Yeah.
I wish I didn't have to do. I wish I could just be and that it would happen for me. So yeah, two sides of the same coin, but very different as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really fascinating to see how, like you said, same people, same circumstances, but the way that it landed with us and how we experienced those events or those people, had very different outcomes for both of us, or maybe it looked quite different. The outcome in the end is that you then gravitate towards people or relationships, or you find yourself in the same patterns and thinking, why does this keep happening? Why do I keep feeling the same way? And then you reach a point where you realize actually it has nothing to do with the people or the circumstances around me. It has to do with, again, going back to self, the relationship that I have with myself. Like, what are my needs and how am I, what is the position I have towards my own heart, and towards myself and toward like the little girl who still has those very, very, healthy needs and is just trying really hard to meet them in unhealthy ways. So
Yes.
when you kind of start having those conversations, yeah, yeah, so I think I noticed that in some of my relationships and what I was doing or what I was wanting to get out of them. And over time, yeah, I've been really, I think, looking more internally at like, okay, well, what is my relationship with myself and how am I able to meet my own needs without having someone? Of course, you want a partner who is supportive and loving and caring and all those good things. But at the end of the day, if you can't even offer yourself those things, then somebody else coming in to try to meet them, they're never going to, it's not going to satisfy, it's not going to fulfill you. And you're still going to have this internal conflict and this anguish inside you. So it always starts and, actually ends at home with you. But
Well,
the other question was kind of like, sorry, go ahead.
something you mentioned right there was that we're always looking for outside people to meet those needs, and that's good, right? In a healthy relationship, we are interdependent, right? We're not
Right,
codependent. That's too much. We're not
right.
independent because we still need them. So we're interdependent. But I think because they're human too, right? And I think this is why so many people gravitate towards religion because there's always unconditional love, right? With God, there's always unconditional love. It's always going to be there. No matter what we do, it's always going to be there. With humans, unfortunately, it is conditional because they're human too. And so when we're looking for somebody else to meet our needs and going like, I've got this huge need, please meet 100% of it. And they're saying, depending on my mood and my own needs as well, I may be able to 100, sometimes 98% of it I can meet. Other times it's going to be 2%. And so it's very, very conditional. And if we experience love or support or understanding as conditional as a child of sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not, right? We have a parent that's unpredictable. Sometimes they're super loving, sometimes they're completely avoidant. And I don't know what at any one day, what parent I'm going to be encountering. So I need to suit my needs or suit my personality. Sorry, change my personality to suit them so I can keep getting that, right? Um, and then when we put our needs and put it completely at the mercy of somebody else, sometimes we're going to be pretty satisfied. Other times it's going to feel like they're only meeting 2%. Where am I going to get the rest of that? Right. And then we become either more needy, you give me more, I need more, or we just like, well, see, nobody's going to meet my needs and shut off completely.
Right,
So
right.
this is why it is so important that we go to the only one person or God, right? This is why people find that comfort in religion and a savior and a God because they know that it's a never-ending stream. No matter what happens, He's never going to abandon me, right? And we can do the same with ourselves, right?
Mm.
We can learn to offer ourselves that same kind of unconditional love, and well, that's the goal, right? We're
That's the
still
goal.
human as well, and
Yes.
the ups and downs. It's a long journey, but that's
Mhm.
the goal, right? To kind of offer
Yeah.
ourselves that. So that's that
Mm.
constant support.
Yes, yeah. To learn that. That's very important. Yeah. I think we may be short on time to discuss in this episode about our relationships more with, let's say, our more like current or evolved relationship with our parents and then also our children. Today, maybe we can end it, and then maybe the next episode we can talk more about those things because I think that is really kind of the culmination or coming full circle of where has all this inner work and this inner struggle and this kind of painful journey of relationship with self, how then does it manifest now in our relationships with others in really beautiful, healing, wholesome ways? So it's nice to get to that point we'll do that in the next episode. So today, maybe we'll just end on, do we have any final thoughts kind of about, I guess, relationship with ourself first? Any tips or pointers or ideas for what that looks like? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we covered most of it, that it's an ongoing thing. It is
Mm,
the goal is for it to be eventually unconditional. And I
mm,
don't think anybody, I don't know, maybe some monks or somebody who have ascended to a higher plane get that, but that's a life's work for us, is to this offer ourselves this unconditional love and acceptance and support. And
mm,
that in doing it with ourselves doesn't mean we don't need it from other people, right? We're still looking for it in other people, but there is a healthy balance of dependence on, or I guess not dependence, but knowing that we can offer it to ourselves. We always have that reserve to go back to. And when we're coming from that already kind of a place of wholeness there, or at least a good amount of support there, because it's never going to be 100%, that we're not coming to somebody with a completely empty cup and saying, fill it all. And then when you can't fill it, I guess you must not be the right person. I'm going to go to somebody else. We're constantly looking for somebody to fill that huge need of ours, right? And that if we do the work, and that's, taking accountability and responsibility and maturing and growing up, that we are responsible for meeting our needs. We're the first person we go to, right? And then whatever isn't, or the parts of ourselves that we can't fulfill because we do need this in relationship from other people, then we go to them and say, hey, I've taken care of a good part of my own needs, but there's still a little bit extra that I really would like you to fulfill, right? Or I'd really like you to fill. And that I think our partners also sense that when we've done the work ourselves and are coming to them for a sense of connection with them, but also a sense of, hey, can I still count on you, right? Can I trust you? Rather than, I've done none of the work myself and I'm expecting you to do all of it. That's basically what
right.
we do as kids, right? It's a
Mm,
very immature way of meet all my needs because I'm completely incapable. And the thing
mm,
is that as adults, if we are incapable, then that's where our skill needs to grow. Rather than just trying to find a different partner who's going to
mm,
meet our needs better, start taking some accountability and start doing the work first and do some of it. And then whatever's left over, go to somebody else. So I always feel that's kind of the right order. At least
yes, exactly. Yeah. And doing the work ourselves then is going to create space and free up, resources in ourselves then to then create those healthy relationships with others. And it's interesting how, like, one person, the energy and the work that one person is doing, it impacts others. It, like, sets off like a domino effect when you are doing it. Many times, you're kind of like, oh, I'm just doing this for myself, but what about all the people around me? And I think you and I had this conversation recently. I'm like, yes, yes, but what about, but what about, but what about? And I think you had a really nice way of putting it. You kind of reframed it in a sense. Sometimes you're feeling like, yes, but I am doing all this work. So why shouldn't other people do it as well? Like, it's not fair. It's not fair
not
at the
fair.
end of the day,
Yes.
Why do I have to do all the
Yes.
work? And I love the way you put it. You're like, okay, so then reframe it. Like, okay, I'm doing all this work. You can join me if you like. You're invited to come and join me on this journey or not, your choice, but I'm going off, And then in that way, you kind of feel like, okay, I'm doing work. I'm going to get the benefit, reap the benefit of it. And other people, that's their choice whether they want to or not, hopefully, And most of the time, when you are with someone and you love them and it's just a matter of human nature and kind of like moving past that, what is it like the desire to kind of stay and not change versus change and grow and all that momentum and good stuff. Most of the time they will join you, but if not, it's like you're okay because you've let go of it. You've made a decision that I can go on. I can do that work, and I don't need you and I to be hand in hand and doing this absolutely together. That has like been such a big thing for me because I'm very into like this fairness and then equality, and then no, we both need to be putting in. But, at the end of the day, it's not that black and white and it's not that rigid. And we need to kind of, just go with the flow. So that's what I'm learning a lot about relationships, that it's a dance. And sometimes you can't like learn all the right steps and it cannot be completely choreographed. What you're actually looking for, I think, is more musicality. You want to be able to turn on the music and feel the music and go with the rhythm and the beat and not be like, yes, but we need to like have all these steps done. There is a time and place for that, but there is another time to just let the musicality flow and move. And I think that's, the kind of the dance of relationship. So, and then also the other thing is that realizing we are relational beings. So some people are like, oh, it's just too much work. I'm just going to be committedly single, or I'm just going to kind of focus on self and focus on self. And yes, at a time and place, there is really a time where we not need to not be constantly swiping and looking for the next, online date just to fill an empty hole. We do need to do the work on ourselves. But then at the end of the day, it's like we are going to grow and heal in relationships, because like the trauma that we've experienced, that you and I experienced as children, as young girls, in our, kind of earlier relationships as young women, the trauma happened in those relationships, but it's then going to heal in relationship as well, right? When we're with our partners who love us, who care for us, we do have healthy relationships. Sometimes unhealthy things happen just because it's life and we're humans, but that doesn't mean that we need to kind of like resort to what we were doing before. We can be like, okay, now I'm in a safe relationship. I have the tools, I have the skills, I know this person loves me. Okay, how can I heal now from my wounds in this safe relationship, even though it doesn't feel that way? So it's, that muscle memory sometimes, like I've got it once, I've got it twice. Okay, let's keep doing it. So the healing that happens in relationship is also so key to understand and know that you're not going to heal and then you're going to have a perfect relationship. You're going to be in that relationship and then that healing work is going to be going on. Yeah.
Yes. This is kind of what I was having a conversation with my husband the other night about it, how schools basically, I'm a teacher. We love schools, but at the same time, the way they teach is so contrary to how nature and life teaches. Life teaches, look at most kids before they went to school. They went out, they climbed trees, they stepped on the wrong branch, they fall out of the tree, they got hurt, right? They learn, and then next time they learned through trial and error. Trial meaning they have to do the thing and then they learn. That is, so one of my mentors talked about an entrepreneur mindset, how entrepreneurs get an idea, do the thing, get the data, learn from the data, and readjust. Schools are
Mm.
learn, then test, and
Mm.
then fail the test or you did well, right? There is no, is that entrepreneurs and the way life teaches is test, then learn, test, then learn. And that's a
Mm.
growth rather than learn and then test. If you fail the test, you're a failure, right? That's the end of
Right.
everything. And so the same thing, like when we are struggling in relationship, if we're like, I need to be completely healed first, obviously we need to we're not going to bring so much of our baggage, having done none of the actual healing work and just expect our partner to fix it all. That's completely unhealthy. But understanding that most of the learning is going to be done in the moment. You're not even going to realize you had these triggers until you're actually triggered because something happened. You're like, oh, I didn't
Oh.
realize. And then you have enough knowledge and stuff, and you're like, oh,
Mm.
and it's related to that. And then I got this, I already know I have this existing childhood wound of, for me, abandonment. And I see how that's leading into all of this. Okay. But that, yeah, obviously learning and having to learn these lessons with a safe person is so important. That's why
Mm.
it's kind of a catch 22, because when you're unhealthy, you're kind of going to kind of attract people to you that either will exacerbate the wounds you already have or give you the opportunity, if they're healthy and safe, give you the opportunity to learn from them, and they're going to be growing with you, right? And I guess, yeah, I just went on a huge tangent and I totally forgot what I was talking about. But yeah,
Yeah,
something like
sometimes
that.
being in those relationships that aren't really unhealthy, they're going to bring all those things to the fore. But I think like even being in healthy relationships, just because we're human and no two of one of us are alike, we're going to clash. There's going to be things that brush you the wrong way, or even like some moments where you feel like the circumstances feel and this condition it feels like it did way back then, but it isn't. Like I'm in a safe place. I know this person loves me, but the feelings can be the same. And if you kind of like you haven't made that connection, you can then respond to the way things were way back when. So this is also, something that I'm working on with my therapist is EMDR to understand, what it was like back then, your triggers, and then how things come up in the moment, and then how you would like things to be, in the future. So it's making those distinctions, making those connections, and then saying, okay, like you said, the self-soothing, the self-compassion, giving yourself the unconditional love, and okay, now what can I do here with this new opportunity, with this new person? Yeah. Or it could be older or old person, but same situation. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
Big journey, big journey, but
Yes,
so
long journey. So, and we will continue it at our next podcast because we didn't finish everything today. But I think it was a good starter, and it kind of set the stage for kind of building on it next time.
because this isn't like we're talking about at the very beginning, it's not surface level, right? We're going deep.
Yeah.
And so I don't feel we can kind of throw stuff out and be like, yes, let's just talk about this briefly on a surface level and jump right into. It's like each of the questions you asked have so much depth and nuance to them. That's why I think, each one question in itself could be a podcast in itself and going all the deep, but we're trying to keep it a little bit, a bit more bite-sized, even though I think we just did an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Um,
Our bite size.
our bite-sized.
Yeah.
Two people, very close.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for being with us again today. And we look forward to creating the next episode, which will be a continuation of this one. And we hope that you all feel safe, grounded, loved, well cared for in your relationships, or, in the healing work that you're doing yourself to bring you to those beautiful relationships in the future. Yeah. So thank you all so much. And we will be seeing you next time. Bye.